Welcome to another tutorial. We talked last time about basic blood vessels, makeup of the blood, and about the heart. That's really where we spent most of our time in that last tutorial. This time we're going to talk a little bit more about blood vessels. Now with blood vessels, what's nice is they are named often for the area that they are in or that they're headed towards. With these blood vessels, this is another one of those things where you just need to sit down and just process and do it a couple of times. I mentioned this on the last video, but really the best way to practice blood vessels and naming them is to imagine taking a little red blood cell, start at that left ventricle, send them through the aorta, and wherever you want to go, whether it's the finger, the toe, the brain, pick a location, take the blood vessel pathway all the way there, take the veins all the way back, through the heart, to the lungs, back to the left side of the heart until you return to that left ventricle. It's the best way to learn them and to practice them, and that's also why that's one of your assignments that you will have for this next week. As we look through the body, really the primary function of blood vessels is to take blood away from the heart, deliver it to whatever needs oxygen, to bring it back and unload any waste or deoxygenated blood, loads of carbon dioxide, back to the right side of the heart, deliver it to the lungs, back from the lungs to the heart. They're just transport vessels is really what they are. To help you kind of understand how some of them are named, I'm going to give you a few examples. I'm not going to give you the full list of them. There is an exhaustive list on Moodle of what you are responsible for blood vessels. So let's just start looking at, this heart model might be the most effective for this. So with the heart model, if we start at the left ventricle and we're moving to the aorta, most often we will see in the body that these blood vessels are paired right side and left side. There are a few exceptions to that in the body, and one of the first exceptions we see is the first one off of the aorta. So coming off of the aorta, after you've given blood back to the heart, the first real big branch that we see is brachiocephalic trunk. So think about that. Brachiocephalic. What does brachio mean? What does cephalic mean? So where do you think this blood vessel is headed? To the arm and to the head. Then the next vessels that you see off of here are headed to the left side of the body, the left subclavian, and also the left common carotid artery. I don't know why the body does this, but the brachiocephalic then divides and becomes those exact same two things on the other side, but we only have one brachiocephalic trunk. So that's an example of a difference there. So as we see brachiocephalic trunk becoming subclavian, where do you think that blood vessel might be headed? Sub is under, clavian is clavicle. So you'll see it dive under the clavicle. After it dives under the clavicle, we now enter kind of the armpit area. What do we refer to that region of the body as? Axillary. So you'll see axillary artery. Then it moves out of the armpit and into the upper arm. What do we call that area? Brachial. So we now have a brachial artery. As you move on down, it bifurcates into a radial and an ulnar artery. Again, name for location. As we continue on, it goes down to digital arteries into your fingers. The blood vessels are named often for where they are headed. Now, what's unique about our body is we often will have areas of collateral circulation. Collateral meaning there's not just one way to get there, but there may be more than one way to get there, multiple ways. We see that with our hands and our feet, that there's some superficial and deep blood flow, more than one way to get blood flow to our hand, to our feet. Another great example of it is actually located in the brain. Collateral circulation is great for areas that are very important for our body. And the heart, the brain, two of our biggest ones that we really need, right? So let's look at the brain. When you look at the brain, you will have blood flow coming up from anteriorly from the carotid arteries, but you also have blood flow going up posteriorly through your vertebral arteries that run up through the cervical vertebrae. Now they come from posteriorly and anteriorly, and then they meet just inferiorly to the brain. And it's called the circle of Willis. And it kind of looks like a donut. So you've got blood flow coming more towards the front of the donut, blood flow coming from the back of the donut. So if at any place in that donut it might get occluded or blocked off, there's circulation coming from the other side that can come meet that need as well. As blood flow comes from the front anteriorly through the carotid arteries, it comes up into that donut, and then blood flow goes to the anterior portions towards the frontal lobe. It goes to the middle and to the posterior cerebral arteries. Anterior, middle, and cerebral arteries. But with that donut, if you have occluded circulation in one area, the other arteries can help fill in that need, fill in that gap. So that's collateral circulation. Some areas that tend to get confusing can be fetal circulation. So I want to talk through that just a little bit. Now, a fetus is inside the body, female's body, right? When the female is giving blood flow to the baby, do you remember how it gets there? The placenta lines the uterus, and off of the placenta is the umbilical cord. So the umbilical cord goes to the baby. Now, the umbilical cord has vein and artery as well. And just like we talked before, that artery means away from the heart, right? Vein means it's coming towards the heart. Now what's different here, and can get confusing, is what is deoxygenated and what is oxygenated. So when we look at the fetus is receiving blood flow from the mom. It's oxygenated blood. That's the good blood that it wants. It comes in through the umbilical vein. And it comes to the baby, and then the baby gets what it needs, and then as it takes the oxygen and gives off waste and carbon dioxide, it sends out actually 2 umbilical arteries that go back to the mom for the mom to get rid of that through her lungs. Now, with fetal circulation, it's receiving already oxygenated blood. Now, that's not the case with adults, right? If you remember, we did the box where we had the right atrium and right ventricle. And remember, this was all deoxygenated blood coming in. But to the fetus, it's actually receiving oxygenated blood. So is there any reason to really send any blood flow to the lungs? No, because the fetus, its lungs, don't serve a purpose when they're in the uterus, right? So we find there's some differences within the heart for fetus versus adult. If we look at the heart, right atrium, right ventricle, there's no point in heading all of our blood to the right ventricle to the lungs of the fetus because they're not functioning in how we think of taking in oxygen and exchanging gases. So instead, if we open up right atrium, we'll find there's actually a hole to the left atrium, bypassing the lungs completely. Now, when we're born, the first couple of breaths and the change of pressure actually helps close that. But in the fetus, there's a hole, and it's called the foramen ovale. In adults, there's a small remnant left, and it's just a shallow depression in that right atrium called the fossa ovalis, where it's just a shallow depression, but it's no longer a hole. But in the fetus, it's the foramen ovale. We also see the ductus arteriosus, where the pulmonary artery and the aorta have a little bit of a connection there because the pulmonary artery doesn't need to send tons of blood flow to the lungs in the fetus. Instead, it can go right back into the aorta and be sent out to the body of the fetus that is growing and developing and needs that oxygen much more. So fetal circulation is a little bit different and can get confusing when you think oxygenated, deoxygenated blood. Hopefully that helps a little bit with that. The last part of circulation I want to talk to you about is actually the lymph system. The lymph system is not a standalone system of the body. It's really a combination of the immune system and the circulatory system working together. The lymph system, a lot of you have heard the term lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are groups of the lymph system in different areas of the body. You've been to the doctor before, and one of the first things they do is feel underneath your neck. So you have groupings of these nodes in your neck, in your armpits, in your groin. Certain areas that when you're sick really are collecting a lot of white blood cells that are trying to fight off infection. So when the lymph system is working overtime, they often become enlarged. Now, the purpose of those nodes is to gather extra fluid or lymph that has come from that plasma in the blood that's overflowed and the tissues can't hold it anymore. It's supposed to take that, any of those waste products from white blood cells fighting off infection. It takes those things and it gathers them and groups them and starts to send them back into circulation in your body. Now, when we look at the lymph system, we really take the body and divide it unevenly. I don't know why, but this is the way we do it. It's the right upper quadrant, so really right head and neck, right upper extremity. And lymph that's coming from the right head and neck, right side of the body, is going to come and it's going to dump all of that lymph back into the right subclavian or right brachiocephalic vein. It comes through the right lymph duct and will dump in there. The left side of the body, left head and neck, left arm, and then the entire lower half of your body actually collects lymph along your thoracic duct. The thoracic duct runs along where your inferior vena cava is and your thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta. It runs right along there, kind of anteriorly to your spine. Remember, nerve, artery, vein, and lymph often run together. So the thoracic duct brings all of that from your groin, from the lower extremity, pulls it up, gathers everything from left side of the armpit, left side of the head and neck, drains it into the thoracic duct, and the thoracic duct then dumps all of that lymph back into the venous system at the left subclavian vein or left brachiocephalic vein. At the very very inferior portion of the thoracic duct, there's a little bit of an enlargement there, and that's called the cisterna chyli. And that's where we see a lot of lymph coming back in and draining from the lower extremity and from the gut. You got to think a lot of bacteria that we ingest. So a lot of abdominal lymph coming in to that cisterna chyli and then the thoracic duct. So lymph system is not its own system. It's a combination, a symbiotic relationship of the circulatory system and the immune system working together. Fetal circulation is a little bit different than what it is in adults. And blood vessels are named often for where they're going or where they're crossing over. So the rest of your time studying, really think about taking that red blood cell and tracing it through all the different arteries and veins. There is that exhaustive list on Moodle. Make sure you look at that and are able to identify and name those blood vessels as well. It's going to be a lot of studying, but I know you can do it. Good luck.